அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி 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 தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி 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 தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி.
Morning to everybody. Vanakkam. Thank you. And needless to say, it's a rare privilege to be able to have the opportunity to speak about Vallalar's teachings, because every time we immerse ourselves in the teachings of Vallalar, the true teachings of Vallalar, we are tuning ourselves to his being, to the extent I guess we are capable of. So that's a very rare privilege. As I think I mentioned in the last conversation, dialogue or talk, the teacher's spirit is there in the teachings. And the more we absorb the teachings and practice them, contemplate them, think about them, discuss them, the more we are in tune with the teacher. So that is what is going on here, and we have to, I think in my view, consider this a rare privilege or punyam. Okay, so let us start. Actually, I should have added the word higher. So it is actually a program, the title should have been a program of higher education. That is the main focus of this conversation or talk, if you will. Program of higher education based on Suddha Sanmargam, and I can only give some sketches and then pursue some specific things on later occasions. So we can start with by taking note of Vallalar's emphasis on education as such, kalvi, and it is evident in one of his early letters. The letter in 1858 to Irukkam Rattina Mudaliya. So in 1858, Vallalar was 35 years old. And Vallalar writes in that letter, the end of that letter, and can everyone hear me? I just want to make sure, double check.
Yes, Doctor, we can hear you.
All right. He says, Siranjeevi Namastuvaya Pillai Avvidam Padikka Vendum Endru Varugindran Avanai Padippin Vishayathil Mathiram Adikkadi Visarikka Vendum. So, in English, that means Siranjeevi Namastuvaya Pillai, who was a relative of Ramalingam, maybe a nephew or something, has gone there, that is to Chennai, and this is the letter to Irukkam Rattina Mudaliya, who was a long time, early associate of Vallalar, friend of Vallalar's youth when Vallalar moved to Chennai, or his family moved to Chennai, a city in southern India. So in any case, this letter says, in English translation, Siranjeevi Namastuvaya Pillai has gone there, has come there to Chennai to pursue his education. Evidently, Vallalar was not in Chennai when he wrote this. You may ascertain regularly his progress in his studies. And then he says, I wish to hear soon about the well-being of yourself and Nayaka. My mind is anxious on account of this concern. Therefore, you must let me know. We know that's an indication of Vallalar's usual, almost motherly concern for the well-being of his friends and associates. In any case, the important lines are the ones in which he says, Chiranjeevi Namasivayam has come there to pursue his education. You may ascertain regularly his progress in his studies, and of course, inform me, to that effect. அவனை படிப்பின் விஷயத்தில் மாத்திரம் அடிக்கடி விசாரிக்க வேண்டும். So he's only interested in progress that Namasivayam Pillai makes in his education. There is another letter in which Vallalar again emphasizes there are some interesting remarks on education. I think I have a couple of pieces in my blog, letters of Ramalingam, which I need to continue. In fact, I've started certain, I've opened up some series and they need to be completed. So there's some pending work to be done on the blog on Ramalingam or Vallalar. So the second letter, which is dated May 31st, 1858, again to Irukam Rattina Mudaliyar, Vallalar says, and again it's interesting to note how Vallalar always begins his letter with certain greetings and well wishes. It is kind of evidence of his emphasis on subham, or auspiciousness. It's not blunt, and it's not insincere or shallow. And there is a certain, there's a dignity and culture, and consideration, connotum, and so forth in the way Vallalar begins his letters. And I think we can learn a lot about what can be called Tamil cultural style etiquette from that. Arulari Urukka Mudaliya Subhagunangalil Siranda Chiranjeevi. Chiranjeevi is also a term that Vallalar uses, a term of blessing for, in fact, immortality. Of course, in Suddha Sanmargam, Maranamilla Peruvarvu is our goal. And it's kind of interesting that almost all of Vallalar's letters, I think, use this word of blessing, Chiranjeevi. Chiranjeevi Rattina Mudaliyarukku Sivagadakshathal Tirgayilum Sagala Sambattum Undavanavaga Tamadu Subhasaritra Vibhavangalai Adikadi Ketka Virubbingiன்றேன். And then in the second letter also, Chiranjeevi Rattina Mudaliyarukku Tirgayilum Sagala Sambattum Menmelum Undavadaga. Now this etiquette thing that I'm pointing out, Vallalar's etiquette, then, on another letter he starts, Anbu Arivu Irakkam Urukkam Mudaliya Nargunangalaal Sirandu Namadu Kanmani Pol Vilagugiன்ற Anbulla Tangalukku. So this is etiquette, and I think that's a very important part of education. As such, it is etiquette that is sincere, not shallow. Have a good day, have a nice day, and so forth. Said in a very mechanical fashion, without any genuine feeling. That is not the kind of thing that Vallalar expresses in this letter. There is a concern for the well-being of the other person, and it is expressed, by such expressions. as அன்பு அறிவு இரக்கம் ஒழுக்கம் முதலிய நற்குணங்களால் சிறந்து நமது கண்மணி போல் விளங்குகின்ற அன்புள்ள தங்களுக்கு and so forth. So it's something to, I think we need to recover and practice, especially in Suddha Sanmargam. Now, in any case, that letter, the other letter, Vallalar says, in the Kadidam Kondu Varigendra Chiranjeevi Kumarasamy Pillai, this is another person, Kumarasamy Pillai, Padikka Vendum endru virumbi irukirapadiyal, avanukku endha vidathil padipithal padippu varumo, andha vidathil padipikka vendum. Chiranjeevi Namasivayatthukkum iduve. The English translation is, since the bearer of this letter, Kumarasamy Pillai, is coming there, which is again Chennai, where Irukkam Rattina Mudaliyar was residing at this time. Since the bearer of this letter, Kumarasamy Pillai, is coming there with the desire to pursue his education, he should be encouraged to learn in the manner which facilitates his progress in his studies, or learn in the manner which helps his progress in his studies. Chiranjeevi Namasivayam should also be encouraged in the same way. After again, as I said, the teacher's spirit lives in the teachings. So we have to really pay a lot of careful attention, gather our minds. We cannot be slothful and sloppy and so forth when we are trying to engage with our teacher's teachings. Of course, we are imperfect, but, when we discover that we're being careless and all that, we have to pull ourselves and pay attention. So take note of the importance of the teachings. So this is in 1858, when Vallalar was 35 years old, and he is expressing what is now known as student-centered learning. Student-centered education. Okay? அவனுக்கு எந்த விதத்தால் படிப்பித்தால் படிப்பு வருமோ அந்த விதத்தில் படிப்பிக்க வேண்டும். சிரஞ்சீவி நமசிவாயத்துக்கும் இதுவே. He should be encouraged to learn in the manner which facilitates or helps his progress in his studies. And the other person, Chiranjeevi Namasivayam, should also be encouraged in the same way. Again, I will sometimes repeat things, and I hope you'll be patient with me. I think repetition is good, as long as, of course, I'm not starting to do it too much, and if I'm starting to do it too much, you may kindly point out. So as I was saying, this is Vallalar's extraordinary emphasis on student-centered approach. This is, again, he's not saying, obviously, it's not about drumming things into the student's head and heart and soul, regardless of the student's own inclination and aptitude and what works for the student in terms of a means or method of learning. No. This is, that's the system, horrible system that, India got from the British and implemented, and also some aspects of the traditional system are also like that. Although there are some good things too in the traditional Indian system, which is largely repetition. As you know, the teacher takes the text, the student repeats, the teacher gives a commentary, the student then repeats, and so forth. And sometimes the student is very good, extraordinary, then questions may be asked in some discussion, and then, you only have students coming up with their own commentaries on, whether maybe it's Upanishad or whatever it is. But usually it's just repetition. The student simply repeats what the teacher says, and the teacher basically dictates the method of learning. Now, of course, the teacher is in a privileged position to understand and communicate, understand the subject matter and communicate information on the subject matter. But Vallalar's point is that that should actually enable the teacher to also understand the bent of mind of the student and what the student's aptitude is and what the student likes to do in order to learn. And that's why he says he should be encouraged to learn in the manner which facilitates his progress in his studies. அவனுக்கு எந்த விதத்தில் படிப்பித்தால் படிப்பு வருமோ அந்த விதத்தில் படிப்பிக்க வேண்டும். And obviously this is going to vary from student to student. And that's why, paying attention to this factor is student-centered teaching. And in 1858, Vallalar has affirmed it. So we want to keep that in mind, by way of, I guess an introductory understanding of Vallalar Kartiya Kalvi Murai. Forcing the student against his or her own inclinations and what actually they prefer to do in order to learn. Of course, that's given. Learning process is given. But then it has to be student-centered in the sense that you have to take into account the student's bent of mind. Like, for example, some students are more visual learners. They like to see diagrams, pictures, maybe photographs, visual representation. And if that's how they want to learn, then we use that in this Suddha Sanmargam-based approach. It's kind of commonplace, perhaps, today, to speak of, especially in the West and so forth, student-centered learning. But it's extraordinary, as I've said, that Vallalar has emphasized that in 1858. And I point out in this piece in my blog that perhaps his own early experiences with the mechanical and mind-numbing rote learning, that is repetition and vomiting. Vomiting means just repeating and regurgitating. His own dislike of that. As we know, Vallalar didn't like to go to school. The formal education, he did not like that. And of course, later he would say that Sandai Padippu, education in the marketplace for the sake of the marketplace, money and this and that. And that's why he rejected that. So perhaps it comes from his own early encounter with this kind of mechanical system of education, which again is still prevalent in India. Maybe it's changing slowly, but it's still pretty strong. And Vallalar quit school in childhood, and he was self-taught. I think he was probably assisted by some of the scholars who used to visit his brother, or some of the scholars that his brother may have visited, and Vallalar may, with his precocious intelligence, may have absorbed a great deal more than someone in his age would normally do. But he was self-taught, in many branches of learning: Tamil grammar, Tamil poetry, philosophy, architecture. Nobody, he didn't go to any school to learn architecture. I'm pretty sure he discussed with some architects, in places like Chidambaram or other temples he might have visited, or people with knowledge, of buildings and so forth. I'm pretty sure that happened, but it was all his own process of learning. And that's why, just another example, he designed this structure of Satyajnana Sabai, which is quite a remarkable structure. But, Vallalar didn't have any formal training in architecture. So that we can also learn from that, and of course we know that Thoruvur has said that, Thoruvur Velayavada Mudaliyar has said that Vallalar was very active, his food and everything was very simple, but he was quite, ceaselessly active, meaning, hardly, and Thoruvur says in his reminiscences, he was hardly known to take rest. And I think Thoruvur is recollecting, Thoruvur's recollections pertain to the time from which, at which he became acquainted with Vallalar, and that acquaintance continued, through many decades, at least almost we could say 2 decades or something like that, 20 plus years. And it's based on that, those number of years that Thoruvur knew Vallalar. And so when Thoruvur says that Valayada Mudaliyar, he says that Ramalingam was hardly known to take any rest, I mean, that also tells us something about what we need to be doing, to try and overcome sloth and laziness and that kind of stuff. Of course, we need to take rest. That goes without saying. I'll get into that later. But it does also tell us about the importance of effort, ukam and unarchi and all that, and application to learning, with learning different things, in just the way Vallalar did it. So with those preliminary observations on Vallalar's emphasis on taking into account the student's bent of mind and what kind of learning process is suitable for a particular student, or can be a young person in your own family, your own son or daughter, let's move on. And again, as I said, I'm only going to be painting some sketches, and then later I'll take some questions, hopefully, and then that will give me more food for thought. Now, we know that Vallalar, there are some basic principles for this program of higher education in Suddha Sanmargam. And if we have a university of Suddha Sanmargam, a college of Suddha Sanmargam, these would be the principles and the kinds of studies or inquiries or forms of research that the students would engage in. And I think that's something also to at least contemplate. Not just simply set up one of these usual institutions and just simply say Vallalar School or Vallalar College. That's not what I have in mind. I'm talking about college or university based on Vallalar Kattiya Kalvi Murai, or based on Suddha Sanmargam. And I don't know if there is any such institution today in Chennai. I mean, and again, they may just have the name, but I guess when I talk more about this Vallalar Kattiya Kalvi Murai, higher education, noting that it's higher education that I'm talking about, not elementary or secondary education, maybe you can tell me if there is an institution which is trying to do this, or perhaps we should think about forming such an institution, founding such an institution. As you know, also in this connection, the connection to the point of Vallalar's emphasis on Kalvi, which I think there's many levels to it. Of course, there's Saga Kalvi, that's the highest form of education. But Vallalar did have a concept of Kalvi, which is different from the Sunday Padipu. He started a school, he included women in it, which was a pretty revolutionary move at that time. And he had some plans to write books on his approach to education. or at least of the program of education he had in mind. I think that would have gone into Sanmarga Vilakam and so forth. And it is our loss. Well, in one sense we can say it is our loss, but in another sense, if Valala did not do it in the form which he had at that time, he's doing it through other forms. Okay? Ini ella degangalul nan puguwe means, of course, he's universally present, cosmic consciousness. So many individuals may be doing things that Valala wants to accomplish. Okay? So I guess we'll just have to take it in that sense, which I'm presuming is true. But we need to also be able to recognize when that's happening, when we can say, oh, this sounds like Suddha Sanmargam. Of course, it may not have the label Suddha Sanmargam, but if it is in agreement with Suddha Sanmargam, then we have to take that it is actually an expression of Valala's action. I hope I'm making myself clear. So in any case, the principles for this program of higher education, let's take a look. Two things are very important as central. And you'll have to give me a little bit of time. Perhaps one of you can actually have, maybe you can find it quickly. I've got some things here. Arul, but let's go to the verses on Arul. Arulallad anuvum asaindidad adanal arunalam paravugendra araindha mei sivame. Once again, Arulallad anuvum asaindidad adanal arunalam paravugendra araindha mei sivame. So without Arul, even an atom cannot have any activity. And therefore, Arul Nalam Paravugendra Araindha Meisuvame. What is this Arul Nalam Paravugendra Araindha Meisuvame? Means we have to understand and propagate, disseminate our knowledge or our understanding of the workings of Arul. And Arul, as I have clarified on earlier occasions, it's not just Kadavul Karunai or divine compassion. It is actually the highest Shakti or force. So it's Arul Shakti or Arul Shakti. That's how we have to take it. And what Valala has said is that since without Arul Shakti, so it's not just some feeling or emotion, it's the most powerful force at work, Arut Shakti. Since without it, even the atom cannot have any activity, Anu Asindada. Therefore, Arul Nalam Paravugendra Araindha Meisuvame. So we have to try to understand the workings of this Arut Shakti and propagate our knowledge of it, celebrate. That's the first thing. So whatever we are going to do in this program of education in Suddha Sanmargam has as its goal knowledge of Arut Shakti. And Arul Nalam Paravugendra Araindha Meisuvame means whatever, whatever good, whatever the benefits this Arut Shakti has produced, we will have to celebrate that. So the first principle then of Suddha Sanmargam, higher education based on Suddha Sanmargam, is we have to understand all our different forms of inquiry and research and all that should have the goal of understanding the workings of Arut Shakti. Okay, and then that in itself is a huge notion worth exploring. How does it actually work? So, taken biology, how do we orient the research to achieve this goal, or to come somewhere near this goal of understanding Arut Sakti. Okay, so any domain, anything that we are going to examine or inquire into, do research, we want to understand the workings of Arut Sakti in that domain or in that field. Okay, so these are some general principles, of course. A lot of interesting issues can come when you talk about specifics. The other thing is also in the Agaval. And I want to, of course, say again that the Agaval is our source. It is our treasure, of treasure chest of the teachings of Vallala. Uyirul yam yemul uyir. Ivai unande uir nalam paravigendra meisuvame. So, uir nalam, I am in all life, translation, Arutparinjodi says to Vallala, I am in all life, and all life is in me. Therefore, work for the well-being, welfare of all life. Vir nalam paravaga. So that is the other central principle of any program of education based on Suddha Sanmargam. First is to understand the workings of Arut Sakti. All education must, higher education must strive to understand the workings of Arut Sakti in and around us. And the second central principle is that whatever we try to know should have the goal of promoting the well-being, welfare of life. That would mean we have to understand the conditions which promote, which protect and promote the well-being of living beings. And of course, we also have to understand the factors that can damage or destroy living beings, so that we can do what we can to protect them from such factors. Okay, so again, to kind of recap, the two basic principles that the whole program of education, higher education in Suddha Sanmargam should follow and should be in agreement with are the principles of Arul Nalam Paravaga and Uir Nalam Paravaga. First has to do with understanding the workings of Arul. Second has to do with understanding what actually promotes the well-being, welfare of living beings. Essentially, Uir Nalam, life. Okay. So let's keep that in mind. And the Uir Nalam, of course, both of them are going to bring into the picture Jivagarnya Urka. As well, Allah has made it clear that is that is the central means of attaining Arul, and it has to do with the Jivagarunyam, Uirgalukku Inbam. That's the way Uirgalukku Inbam undagum. If we practice Jivagarnya Workam, that is the goal of the path of compassion is to make living beings happy. Or to achieve the well-being of living beings. So the path of compassion automatically comes into the picture if we take these two principles, to understand the workings of Arul and to understand and promote the conditions for the well-being of living beings. Uir Nalam cannot be taken lightly. Uir Nalam Paravaga Endarainda Meisivame. Allah is saying that it came directly from Arutparinjodi. I am in all life is in me, therefore promote the well-being of life. Vir nalam. Okay? What we have today is vir nasam. Okay? Everything, the science, technology, is producing vir nasam, not vir nalam. And you can see this in what's happening with climate change, which is the result of high levels of carbon emissions, CO2. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. That means it traps heat in the Earth's atmosphere. And the more carbon dioxide we're emitting, it's like we're making the blanket thicker and thicker, so it becomes difficult for heat to escape out into space, and it is trapped in the Earth's atmosphere, and this is already producing a lot of disturbances and destruction. Just take a look at what is going on in Australia with the massive wildfires. I'm in Nevada, right next to California, and we've had these kinds of fires in California even in winter. Okay, and hopefully California will not, Australia is not showing us a kind of mirror is not mirroring what's going to happen in California and other places. The temperatures have been soaring every year in places like India. Every year has record temperatures. Okay, a lot of rivers are drying up in southern India and other places. Lakes are drying up. Hurricanes, storms, these are all becoming more and more powerful and violent, and that's again because they are driven by the excess of heat energy that is in the water. So the excess heat is also being absorbed by the oceans. And then there's a time lag for that absorbed heat to be released by the oceans. Okay, so we can expect, we're still in that time lag period. We're seeing some effects in terms of these monster storms and hurricanes because they feed on the fuel or gas of the heat energy. And that's why we're seeing all this very powerful and severe and destructive hurricanes and storms and typhoons and so forth. That's also a result of global warming. And so, and the warming of the oceans are absorbing the heat, and there's only so much they can do, and then of course they'll start releasing that heat, which will then add to the heat in the atmosphere and, produce another cycle of destructive effects. All this is producing vir nasam, the acidification of the oceans. That's already bleaching the coral reefs. Okay, Great Barrier Reef near Australia is undergoing destruction, unprecedented destruction. It will affect marine life. Okay, so we can't just afford to stick our heads into the monitor or whatever little thing we have going and be blind to these developments. And we can't. In Suddha Sanmargam, vir nalam. Uirul yam yamul uir ivai arinde uir nalam paravigendrarinda meisivame. So vir nalam is the central value in Suddha Sanmargam. So when we see vir nasam going on, the dance of vir nasam, as a result of global warming, other kinds of environmental destruction, with the kind of science and technology we have. I mean, the fault is not with science and technology as such, but with the kind of technology and destructive vir nasam producing, destruction of life, this is science and technology which is destroying life. That needs to go. Okay, and the agaval, again, I can only scratch the surface here, and this is for the coming years with Vallala's grace to explore this. the Agaval verses on all the elements of nature. And I hope people are following what I'm saying here. This is all Vallalar's teachings, which are absolutely remarkable and absolutely critical and crucial to the human condition today. When Vallalar talks about all this Aimbudanga, okay, Katru, Veli, Ti, Neer, Man, that's an extraordinary kind of emphasis that he is putting on the role of these elements in supporting life. And instead of having a science that understands how these Aimbudangal and other things are supporting life, what are the energies in them, properties, qualities which sustain life, which promote life, what we are doing is polluting them. Okay, with this kind of, so the science of Virnasa, science and technology, which is polluting. And again, I want to emphasize this, the problem is not with science and technology as such. We need science and technology, but it has to be reoriented to Virnalam rather than Virnasam. And then the question arises, why is science and technology, the forms of science and technology we have, producing Virnasam? Because they are designed to produce profits rather than Virnalam. So carbon, we have, even nuclear power can be considered. I mean, there are hazards, but there are also, the science has given us ways to reduce the risks of the nuclear energy. But nuclear energy is one of the alternatives to consider. I mean, but there are others. Solar power. I'm here in Nevada, and the place should be actually full of solar technology, but it's not. And take Chennai and places like that. I mean, they should have, every corner, they should have a solar energy, solar panel and things like that. Every house should have one. Why not? Because of the stranglehold of the fossil fuel industries, the oil and gas. It's cheaper to produce, profitable to sell. And they don't care. They knew. There's a lot of information that has come out about how all these giant oil companies knew about global warming, but they suppressed that information. Okay, and candidates like Bernie Sanders have said that they're going to hold these oil companies accountable for this. It's just criminality. Okay, it's the criminality that is directed at Virnasam. They knew it, but they continue with it. And what we have now in the United States is a president who is completely indifferent to Virnalam. And it's the same thing in India. These people have a stranglehold on the economy, and they want to continue to produce oil and gas and so forth because, as I said, cheaper to produce, profitable to sell, and they don't seem to give a damn about Virnalam. And, as practitioners or aspirants in Suddha Sanmargam, we have to understand exactly what this is all about. This is all about Virnasam. The destruction of life, the destruction of conditions that support, sustain, and promote the well-being of life. And so we got to start freeing ourselves from this. A lot of movements are taking place in the West and also in India. People are becoming aware, and we have to support that. We have to promote the knowledge that comes from science on the global warming and the Virnasam destruction of life that it's causing and so forth. Okay, so that was the point again on the importance, the centrality of Virnalam in Suddha Sanmargam and what is going on today in the world, which is largely Virnasam. And the science and technology, Suddha Sanmargam is the revolutionary path. that is going to enable us to come up with forms of science and technology. That it's going to provide the value basis, the value foundation, to come up with and to promote policies and all that, to promote Vir Nalam and to counter this wave of Vir Nasam, destruction of life, destruction of conditions that are essential for life. The revolutionary aspect has to do with the value system, and one of my former teachers actually in Canada has written a couple of books on how this machine of Vir Nasam, destruction of the conditions of life, environmental pollution, carbon emissions, and so on and so forth, toxic chemicals, cancer-causing chemicals. I mean, this guy there in the White House is dismantling all kinds of regulations and curbs on environmental pollution. Environmental regulation on water, air, and all that. Everything is dismantling with the sole, and he's very blatant about it, his sole view of enabling these companies to make more profits. Okay? So, Pay ulagor pugal kanakum is an expression in the Agaval. Pay ulagor pugal kanakku. That's exactly what this is. Panakanaku, monetary calculations, bottom line, and so on and so forth, profit margins. And they want to sacrifice Vir on this altar of Panapay, Panapisasi, profit calculations. So we have to become aware of these things and express our commitment in various ways. Not going to become some great thing overnight. It's just small steps. As the Chinese proverb says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a small step. So we have to take these small steps as aspirants and practitioners of Suddha Sanmargam. But anyway, as I was saying, a former teacher of mine, professor, and is actually a member of the prestigious academy in Canada. He wrote a couple of books on how all this Vir Nasam is being driven by a value system that is indifferent to Vir Nalam, or life. And he's written about life ethic and so forth. I remember talking to him about Vallalar when I was a graduate student, and I had some discussions with him that may have had, I suspect it may have had an influence on him. So what we have to do then is to practice and propagate this value system of Suddha Sanmargam, which is the dire need of the times. Vir Nalam oriented ethics. That's what Suddha Sanmargam is. And we know where it comes from, right? This is not simply a product of human reasoning. Virul yam emul vir ivai arinde Vir Nalam paravigendarainda meisuvame, 1872. And I think that all the things that Vallalar does there in the Agaval, which is the most remarkable and revolutionary work of spiritual insight and other forms of insight in the history of humanity, in the history of what you can call, it's not really religion, but religious spiritual thought. When Vallalar Kaptarul Viri, when he prays to all these I'm trying to find it here. If you have, go ahead and point out. Where is this Kaptarul Viri? Kaptarul Viri starts 723. So around 723, Thai Karuppayinu Tadangiya Virgalai Aivura Kaptarul Arupparin Jodi. Muttaivai Payilum Muduvir Tiralgalai Attame Kaptarul Arupparin Jodi. Nilam Perum Uir Vagai Nilkuru Anitum Alampara Kaptarul Arupparin Jodi. Where Vura Uditta Megumuyat Tiralgalai Arvura Kaptarul Arupparin Jodi. உடலுறு பிணியால் உயிருடல் கெடாவகை அடலுற காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி சிசுமுதற் பருவ செயல்களின் உயிர்களை அசைவரக் காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி உயிருறும் உடலையும் உடலுறும் உயிரையும் அயர்வரக் காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி பாடுறும் அகத்தைகள் பலவினும் உயிர்களை ஆடுறக் காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி முச்சுடர் ஆதியால் எச்சக உயிரையும் அச்சர காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. Now notice that, I'm reading verses, those who need English translation, these are verses in the Agaval, which is Vallala's magnum opus, a great, I think it's the greatest work of spiritual poetry that we know, consisting of 1,596 lines, and he is addressing Arutparanjodi, the ultimate reality, the immense light of supreme compassion, or the omni-light of supreme compassion, as I call it. He's addressing this omni-light, this Arutparanjodi, he's petitioning the Arutparanjodi to protect the conditions of existence of different forms of living beings. And I've always thought that he had seen in his vision the enormous destruction that is going to come. And then again, it's all well documented. Now they're calling this epoch, which is dominated by ignorant human beings, Anthropocene. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Doctor, please continue.
Yeah, Anthropocene is this epoch that is dominated by the human species, that is responsible for the extinction already of several species, and it's ongoing at a pretty incredible rate. And for those of you who are interested, you have to be interested because Suddha Sanmargam is an Ethika Virnalam. You may want to look up the sixth extinction. It's a celebrated book by Elizabeth Kolbert, Kolbert, the sixth extinction, and subtitled Unnatural History. It documents the extinction of species that human beings have been producing. But I'm reading those verses. I've just read the verses of Vallalar petitioning Arutparanjodi to protect the conditions of various forms of life. And there are two verses, and I was just reading one that goes, Muchudaradiyal etchaga virayum achara kattarul arutparanjodi, which is, and I was going to say it's remarkable because etchaga means in any word. How did Vallalar know? And well, let me put it this way. So this is remarkable. In 1872, Vallalar is saying, in whatever world life has come about, protect the life in that world. Which means he knew that there are other worlds in which there is life. Otherwise, why would he pray to Arutparanjodi to protect life in other worlds? And now we know from 20th, 21st century science, given the billions of stars that are out there, and they are discovering more and more Earth-like planets, rotating around some of these stars, revolving around some of these stars or suns, the chances of life evolving in these other planets is extremely high elsewhere, in the universe. And so Muchudaradiyal etchaga virayum achara kattarul arutparanjodi becomes a very remarkable verse because it indicates that Vallalar in 1872 knew that there was life in other worlds, not just on Earth. And then he goes, Vanmugir Satyan Mayapurivattuyar Anara Kattarul Arutparanjodi, Inburu Satyal Ilmai Purivat Anbura Kattarul Arutparanjodi, எண்ணியர் சத்தியால் எல்லா உலகினும் அன்னுயிர் காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. எண்ணியர் சத்தியால் எல்லா உலகினும் அன்னுயிர் காத்தருள் அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. Again, reference to other worlds in which there is life, and he is petitioning Arutparanjodi to preserve the conditions of life in those worlds. And then he goes on about other forms of life, including Devarayallam Tigurpura Amudalitavage Kaptarul Arupurunjodi. Extraterrestrials is praying to Arupurunjodi to protect the extraterrestrial forms of life. Agapura Amudalita Ivaradigalai Agapara Kaptarul Arupurunjodi. Again, higher beings who are also living beings. Darumaga Amadar Satti Sattargalai Arulinir Kakum Arupurunjodi. Kalamum Niyadiyam Kattiya Virayum Alura Kaptarul Arupurunjodi, and so forth. This extraordinary prayer, petition to Arupurunjodi to protect the conditions. Now you may see, the thing is, of course, Arupurunjodi is Arupurunjodi. Meaning that it is the supreme light of supreme compassion. So it is going to sustain according to its niyati and arulakinai, the living beings, the conditions which preserve life. And that's what's already the case. Because, there are black holes. These black holes, Subramaniam Chandrasekhar is a Nobel laureate, Indian origin physicist who did pioneering work on black holes. There's a whole science of black holes. These black holes, nothing can escape these black holes. You have suns, there are suns out there that are 100 times, they have greater mass than our sun. But these black holes can chew up those suns like they're chewing up a mashed potato or something, okay? And at the center of our own universe, there's an immense black hole. And there are other black holes that are wandering around. And if one of them comes close to our solar system, it can just simply shred it, okay? It can just simply, our sun will be chewed up. And of course, when the sun gets chewed up, the planets are all finished, including Earth. Now, what is the force that is preventing that? Okay, the black holes they produce Virnasam. Okay, immense forces that produce Virnasam or destruction of life. What is keeping them all, preventing them from destroying the conditions of life, for example, on Earth and so forth, which again depends on the sun and so on. It's all connected to Puram or Andam, the different things in the world and the cosmos. There's a very intimate connection, and there are branches of science like astrobiology and so forth that are exploring more and more this connection between life on Earth and all these other cosmic, factors. So that is already Arupurunjodi's action, Arul action, Arut Sakti. But what then is Vallala doing when he is asking Arupurunjodi to protect? He is actually expressing the attitude we should have. He is taking the position of a devotee, and he is praying to Arupurunjodi, thereby showing us what we should be doing, which is also have the same prayerful attitude to Arupurunjodi, and think about the protection of these different forms of life. Okay? So that again, maybe Vallalar, I think, saw that, there's going to be coming epochs of great destruction of life, Virnasam, and out of compassion, he was petitioning Arupurunjodi to protect the living beings. Now, of course, that can also be done by preserving the conditions, because the existence of living beings depends on these conditions. If we destroy those conditions, then, of course, the living beings are no longer going to be there. This is different from protecting every individual living being. Okay? This is not about protecting every individual living being as such. Yes, Wallalar says Virgo, and that includes individual living beings, but individual living beings have a beginning and end. Yeah, that's already given. You know, you take a lake, there are fishes, crabs, or whatever, and each one has a limited lifespan. It's going to die. That's just niyati. But I see what Wallalar is saying is protect the conditions. That means the condition of the lake and so forth, which helps the fishes to live and propagate and thrive. Okay, that's what it's about. Because if you pollute the lake and make the clog it with all kinds of things, you know, you have so many horrible examples of this going on in India, among other places. Then the life in these lakes and so forth gets destroyed. It can't survive anymore because you are changing the life-sustaining properties of these water bodies. And if you're doing that, then of course life is not going to survive. So the distinction I'm making is between protecting, preserving conditions in which individual living beings can be born and develop, and the protecting every living being. Protecting every living being has its own limitations for the reasons I just explained. But we can do a lot to protect the conditions in which living beings are born and they survive and propagate and so forth. And so I take a lot of Wallalar's verses in the Kaptarul Viri as pertaining to the conditions which sustain the living beings. So, in any case, again, it was all an elaboration of the importance of Vir Nalam. That's the central value in Suddha Sanmargam. That's the foundation for different forms of inquiry that I'll talk about soon. But I was saying, I recall that my former teacher, professor at Canada, McMurtry, he was talking about a new value system, life-oriented new value system, life ethic, life value. That's what we need to move towards, not this, it's actually dead. I mean, money value. Now, what is money? It's not living. And more and more, it's just a bunch of numbers in a bank account. It's usually offshore, tax evasion and so forth by these corporations. And they are using that as the basic standard for doing whatever they are doing. So I want to anticipate something that I'm going to talk about. So what we have is the economics of Vir Nasam, the economics of destruction of life. And Suddha Sanmargam gives us the basis for an economics of Vir Nalam. So instead of doing economics, doing business that is producing Vir Nasam, we then have to, on the basis of Suddha Sanmargam, develop economics that produces Vir Nalam. Of course, the economics that is there does make its contribution to Vir Nalam. Otherwise, it can't possibly continue, right? I mean, they have to produce food and all that. But then take a careful look at the quality of this. There's all kinds of chemicals that are being used, and there's a lot of research on this that are harmful. I mean, when you drink the soda and everything, that's just a bunch of chemicals that are very bad for your teeth. A lot of sugar, very bad for your health, especially in Suddha Sanmargam, where you have to monitor sugar intake. Sarkare intake must be regulated, is what Wallalar is saying. In some of the Upadesa Kurupikal, it's they're attributing some crazy things to Wallalar, like you have to take more and more Sarkare. No, that's not what Wallalar meant. He means regulation of sugar. That's the best way in which you can understand that. But, in all these drinks and soft drinks and so forth, apparently to quench thirst, but you're just dumping more and more sugar into your body. And we know what that is going to produce: sugar imbalance and everything, insulin resistance, diabetes. Okay, well, that's a slow killer of the body. So, and other things, toxic chemicals in the water, lead contamination, and again, the present administration is dismantling some of these regulations. And I don't know, maybe some of you know what is going on in India, if there was any regulation in the first place. Lead and all that, extremely harmful for the brain. It can produce brain damage in children if you drink water regularly that has lead in it or other contaminants. So look at what is going on. As I said, the science and technology we have now is turning more and more into weird nasam. Or whether it's destroying fishes in lakes and rivers, or it's destroying human bodies, it's the same thing. Weird nasam, destruction of life. And Suddha Sanmargam gives us the basis for the value basis, because it puts Veer Nalam as the central value, the flourishing of life, the protection, preservation, and flourishing of life as a central value. It provides the value basis for a new kind of economics. Okay, economics, as I say, economics of Veer Nalam, to counteract this global economics of Veer Nasam. Hey, you call it capitalism or whatever name you give. Look at what it is doing to life. That tells us what its nature is. And we have to remember Arutparanjodi's revelation to Vallalar. Uyirul yam yemmul uyir ivai unarnde uyir nalam paravuga endu araindamai sivame. So that is really the foundation of this whole life ethic in Suddha Sanmargam. And you've had these sessions, I believe you had a session in December. Unfortunately, I couldn't join on Ella Virgalam Inbuttu Varga and so forth. Now, these are not just slogans. We can't just have these slogans that simply say, Allah Virgalam Inbuttu Varga. We have to think about it. What does that mean? Okay? And in terms of institutions, economic practices, social institutions, economic practices, policies, and all that, how do we translate this into reality? Okay? It doesn't mean that you're going to, again, I just want to add this at this point. We'll take this up later, maybe in another talk. It doesn't mean that you're going to allow viruses to destroy your body because, you don't want to kill viruses. Well, there are some questions about the status of viruses, or you have bacteria and so forth. You have to protect your body parasites because your degam is a very important instrument for attaining mutti and siddhi. And of course, jivakaranyam means protecting living beings. So if the animals are also dying because of certain kinds of parasite infections and so forth, diseases, then we have to prevent that. We have to use medicines, whatever, to prevent these parasites, microorganisms, from destroying these degangal bodies. That is all consistent with compassion. So that's just to address somebody who might say, what do you know, Veer Nalam means we shouldn't do anything about bacteria and we should allow the bacteria to invade and take over our bodies and destroy. No, that doesn't follow at all. In fact, as I just said, Jivakarnya Workam has to do with protecting Degangal from various abayangal, as Vallalar points out, the dangers. And disease, Pini, is a danger that Vallalar has already identified, and you have to protect the Degam from it. So anything that helps to do it, you're not going around eliminating all the parasites in the world. There are actually, again, new studies have come about. There are good bacteria in our bodies. There are good microorganisms that have various useful functions, especially in the stomach. They help in digestion. So without some of the bacteria, some of those good bacteria, we won't be able to digest our food. So it's not about destroying all bacteria and all that, but just doing whatever is required to protect the Degam. So anyway, I hope we can, all this has emphasized the importance of Veer Nalam. There's a whole set of values based on Vir Nalam, or the promotion of the well-being of living beings, of life, that form the basis of various things, educational research and all that in Suddha Sanmargam, based on Suddha Sanmargam. Now, the other thing I want to point out, again, these things can be elaborated in the future. You know that Vallalar has repeatedly referred to Agam, Agapuram, Puram, and Purapuram. So the Agam is the Anma, is the realm of the Anma, and life, Vir. Agapuram is the Karanangal, that is the instruments of knowledge. Sittam, which helps us to make decisions, Manam, that helps us to think, and so forth. Then there is Puram, which is the body. It is Puram to the Agam, which is the soul, so Puram is the Degam. And then we have Purapuram, which is Puram to the Puram, which is the body. So Purapuram would be the immediate environment and the world. And that can, again, Purapuram extends from the immediate environment to the universe. Okay? Vallalar, of course, constantly points out, or regularly points out that Arupparanjodi is fully present in all of these four levels. And I think that's why he starts the Agaval by invoking Arupparanjodi 4 times. Arupparanjodi, 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 Arupparanjodi. And then he ends also by invoking Arupparanjodi 4 times. Arupparanjodi, 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 Arupparanjodi. And a piece on my blog, I've pointed out what Vallalar is doing is pointing out the full presence of Arupparanjodi in these 4 levels of reality. Now, what has this got to do with the higher education? Well, higher education is about understanding these 4 levels and the relationships. Okay? In order to understand the workings of Arul again, let's go back to Arul Nalam Paravuga in the Arul Nalam Paravuga, that verse, or that expression in that verse on Arul. So we want to understand how Arul works in Agam, that is the Anma, Agapuram, Karanangal, Puram, the Degam, and Purapuram, which is the immediate environment and the world. And in the second Vinnapam, Vallalar has already talked about how Arul has organized all these different instruments of knowledge and various other things. Karanam, Ubakaranam, and all that. It's a very remarkable document, the second petition, which has to be a fundamental required study in any program of higher education based on Suddha Sanmargam. That's cognitive psychology. And Vallalar has given a sketch of that in the second Vinnapam, when he talks about all these different Karanangal and their Ubakaranangal, all organized to help the Anma to have experience in the world, to have knowledge, to perform actions, and to grow, adhikari development. Okay? So that is going to be part of the system of higher education in Suddha Sanmargam. Now we are also going to understand how the Purapuram, the environment, supports the Puram, the body. Okay, once again, how does Purapuram, the environment, the universe, the world, nature, support nature around us, outside, apparently outside around us, supports the Puram or the body? What are the life-supporting factors? What are the life-destroying factors? Because there are many factors that are harmful to life, like nuclear, radiation and so forth. There are cosmic rays that are very harmful, and our atmosphere actually protects us from that, protects us from those rays. They are very harmful to life, and so when we understand not only the life-supporting but also life-destroying factors and how we can protect ourselves from the life-destroying factors. All this is about how the Purapuram relates to the Puram, the body. And then we ask, how does the Puram, the body, relate to the Agapuram, the instruments of knowledge that Vallalar talks about in the second Vinapam? And he talks about how the Degam is the basis for many of the basis of the workings of many of these cognitive faculties. Okay, and he even mentions two structures of brain. So that's going to be part of the science of Degam in Suddha Sanmargam, in the University or College of Suddha Sanmargam. We will study those things that Vallalar basically has given hints, suggestions, and we will pursue them. What are these two structures of the brain? Angara Mule, Ongara Mule. Okay? Angara, it's already clear, Agangara Mule. That means everything based on Agangaram, self-centered activity, which is what we are engaging in most of the time in our ignorance or anyanam. What kind of brain processes are involved? And for this you have to do brain imaging, okay? Brain imaging studies, the parts of the brain that are involved in this kind of thing, self-centered activity, including survival, gratification, fulfilling your desires, and, asserting your ego and all that. Certainly there is a basis in the brain for these kinds of activities or actions or processes. And then there's the Ongara Mule, which has to do with the going beyond the ego, going beyond Anavam, Agangaram, and so forth, and all the vices, Avyamadi or Arum, so forth, Parame, Veguli, and all that. They go along, they come with Anavam, but we have the ability to go beyond this, and Vallalar, of course, among others, has shown that. Buddha is another person who transcended these factors, Parame, Veguli, and so forth. I'm talking about jealousy, anger, infatuation, delusion, and these kinds of mental factors. If we are doing something to overcome these things, then certain brain processes must be involved in those. And they cannot be the same as the ones that are involved in when you actually indulge in these things, Parame, Veguli, and so forth. There has to be a difference. And that's why Vallalar makes that distinction between Angara Mule and Ongara Mule, which basically means there are two structures of the brain. One helps us to go beyond, or forms the basis for going beyond the ego-centeredness. That is the Ongara Mule structure. And the other one keeps us tied to the Anavam, the ego-centeredness, and that he calls Angara Mule. And in the University or College of Suddha Sanmargam, we will take into account, of course, the brain science that's prevalent, but we will use all that to understand this distinction better, maybe even start new forms of research and so forth to find out more about this. I'm just giving you, again, sketches of the kind of studies that will be pursued in the University or College of Suddha Sanmargam. Just an example there. I've already mentioned economics of Uirnalam. Okay, business of Uirnalam. Certainly you can create businesses, and they're starting to show up now, green-based industries and so forth, that are oriented towards Uirnalam. I'll give you another example there, science of health. The science of health, there is a Suddha Sanmargam science of health, or a science of health based on Suddha Sanmargam. That is going to examine, as Vallalar has pointed out in his great compassion, the role of agaram, food, nittirai, sleep, bhayam, by which he means fear, anxiety. Essentially, he's talking about stress, and maitadam, or sex. So, studies of how food affects the body, studies of how sleep, how much sleep do we need, what is really restful sleep, and so forth. Then stress, what causes stress and how do we get rid of stress, and then the regulation of sexuality. It's not saying eliminate sex, although that's for higher levels of spiritual discipline, but commonly speaking, he's saying regulate it, not suppress it or remove it altogether. And so the science of health in Suddha Sanmargam will involve research into all of these things. And I mentioned food. Yes, what is actually nutritious food? Well, Allah has given various hints in the Agavo. And it pertains to fruit. Fruits are involved. I've already mentioned also about regulation of sugar intake in the context of his advice on health. We can then, there's vegetarian food, the different forms of vegetarian food, the ones that don't involve any killing of animal or consumption of animal meat. That's a whole science in itself. Vegetarian science to see what the nutritional vitamin mineral contents are of all these different forms of vegetarian food, and how should we regulate our diet to take these nutritious forms of food and so on and so forth. And I mentioned sleep, regulation of sleep. And stress, again, it's very interesting. Walala mentions bhayam as something that you have to consider. He says these four things produce deganashtam or deganasam. That means they produce deterioration of health and deterioration, therefore, of the body. Okay? So we'll study in detail in the University or College of Suddha Sanmargam how these four factors play their role in maintaining the health of the body, and what forms of regulation we need with regard to each of these four things to preserve health. In this context, again, Vallalar's own contribution. Again, we learn Vallalar was self-taught, but he did the work. He did the hard work in very challenging circumstances, not to mention people who had no understanding of what he was trying to do, with some very few exceptions. He didn't have a press at his disposal or funds to come easily to publish or to do his work, but still he continued, in a very bare, simple lifestyle. He still continued with his quite ceaseless energy and activity, and produced this. And I'm talking about his Muligai, work on Muligai, herbs. And I don't know if anybody, I've seen a couple of works, I think, in Tamil that do some work at the commentary on, that use some of his hints, but I don't think there is a research publication or a set of research publications dealing with all the herbs that Vallalar has listed in that work on Muligai on herbs, and he has also indicated their health benefits, what they can be used for. You use this for this disease or that problem and so forth. It won't do just to simply, pray to Vallalar and all that. If we're serious about Vallalar's teachings, and remember again, the teacher lives in the teachings. Of course, the teacher is beyond the teachings too, but the spirit of the teacher, if you want to honor the spirit of the teacher, then study the teachings, examine them, do the vicharam, and practice and so on and so forth, and communicate about these things. So where are the research publications on the herbs that Vallalar cataloged and their effects? It's an entire research program that you can engage in. And we can use, again, all the existing research on herbs. It doesn't have to be done in a vacuum. It can also use existing research. There's been some research on some Indian herbs, on ashwagandha and so forth. And then, of course, Valalar mentioned Karisalangani and Musumusukai and all that. Some research has been done on manjal and ginger, manjal or turmeric. There's a UCLA study that shows that turmeric can slow down Alzheimer's, can counteract the buildup of those plaques in the brain that is responsible for Alzheimer's disease. Ginger, benefits have been documented, so on and so forth. So that the science of health is another thing that the University or College of Suddha Sanmargam will pursue. Hopefully I'm showing you, sketching some lines here, what kind of courses we can have, what would be the objectives and so forth. That's all I'm doing. And in a later talk, I'll get down to some of the details and take each of them perhaps separately and relate to contemporary literature and so on and so forth, and talk about what the courses themselves might look like and how they might be organized. So, giving you some sketches, let me look at my notes here for some more, and then I'll wind up here. One of the things I mentioned was the relationship, this Puram, how does it support the Puram? How does Puram support the Agapuram? And then the Agapuram, the Karanangal, how do they serve the Anma? If you read the second Vinnapam, you have some idea, and then you can develop on that basis. But the question of how the Purapuram supports the Puram, that is, how does the environment, the natural environment, and other factors in the universe, how do they support the body? There are so many factors that are responsible, like our bodies contain carbon. You know where carbon comes from? From the stars. Okay? So that's why Carl Sagan, the famous American astrophysicist, he said, we are made of star stuff. That's an example of Purapuram and its relationship to Puram. We are made of star stuff, meaning the carbon that's in our bodies, without which there will be no life, came originally from the stars, the exploding stars, threw out carbon into space. And that formed the basis, in fact, of life. And there is, in fact, one famous astrophysicist, I can't bring his name to my mind right now. I think he was British. He did a lot of work on carbon, and then he said that it looks like a supreme intelligence is behind this. The whole carbon, the structure of carbon and so forth, and the role it has played. He said he found it very difficult to believe that it could have all happened by accident. I'm just throwing that in there as something that some of you may be interested in pursuing if you are interested in Vicharam in Suddha Sanmargam. So the Purapuram's relation to Puram also involves primarily the Aimbudha Viri, all the verses, the extraordinary verses dealing with these Aimbudhangal, the 5 elements as they are called. Now, they have a terrestrial aspect and they have a cosmic aspect. So the Man has a terrestrial aspect, that is the earth, but it also has a cosmic aspect, substance, solidity. That is there elsewhere. You know, the Man on other planets may not be the same as the Man on Earth, but it is still Man. It's still some kind of Man. And Valalar's verses on the nature of Man the Valalar's verses deal with all the various powers and properties of Man, and they include some verses on how this Man supports life. This is also suggested in the second Vinnapam. Okay? In second Vinnapam, let me show you this here. The book here's the book. Second Vinnapam, Vallala says, அகண்ட பூரணானந்தராகிய அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி கடவுளே, ஜீவனை ஆதரிப்பிக்கும் பூத பிருத்திவி தோற்றமும். Prithvi is the earth, the man in the terrestrial aspect, its solidity in the universal or cosmic aspect. He is saying Jivanai Adaripikum, supporting. Again comes back to how the Purapuram supports the Puram, and actually all of these things ultimately we have to relate to Agam, because that's the main thing here. You know, everything is for the Agam or the Anma. That's the Anma. Okay, it's not just the human Zegam. There's a big difference between saying the whole world exists for the human body and then to say the whole world, the universe, has come into existence to help the Anma. The difference is there because the Anma or the soul is also there in animal bodies. So we're not talking about anything that's only pertaining to human beings. It's about the Anma in different living beings and how the various forces in the universe have developed to sustain the birth and existence and so forth of these living beings. So as Vallalar says, Jivanai Adaribikkam Buddha Prithvi Totramum. So we'll have to then study, part of this course of higher education and Suddha Sanmargam, how does the Buddha Prithvi, the earth, support the Jivan, living beings. Okay? He's saying Jivan. He's not saying Manidan. So he's talking about living beings. Not just human beings, who are of course one type of living beings. And there are a lot of books that are coming out, and this is where again, Vicharam and Suddha Sanmargam, we have to try and follow to some extent Vallalar's example of keeping ourselves engaged in inquiry and overcoming sloth and laziness and indifference and all that. So in any case, Buddha Prithvi and how it supports the Jivan or living beings, the earth element, and I was mentioning the works that have come out on mud and dirt in the sense of mud, soil, Of course, it's quite evident that soil is essential for plant life. Without some of those properties that Vallalar is talking about in his verses on Man, we won't have plant life. And if there's no plant life, of course, other Jivargal cannot survive. Which is also a very crucial issue for global warming, because when the global warming is affecting plant life, all the other species dependent on plant life are going to be affected. And already they're talking about the effects on insects, bees, and so forth. Okay? And if we reorganize our science and technology on the basis of Suddha Sanmargam and actually develop new forms of science and technology based on Suddha Sanmargam, then we will understand how Buddha Prithvi Totram supports living beings, how earth, mud, dirt, and all that soil support living beings, and then we will have practices, by practices I mean, forms of science and technology and so forth that do not produce virnasam, but actually help virnasam or destruction of life, but actually help in virnalam or the protection and flourishing of life. Vallalar goes on to say, Jivanai vritti sevikkum buddha neer totramum. Jivanai valaka, that means he's talking about how water helps in the flourishing of living beings, their increase, vritti. Jivanai valakam sevikkum buddhagni totramum. Okay, how heat, Agni is not just fire. Fire is one of the manifestations, but when we talk about Agni, we have to also think about heat and light. Now, heat and light and fire, fire, of course, you talk about solar fire, solar flares and so forth. That's all extraordinary degree of heat that we're dealing with. So we have to understand this also in that cosmic sense, as I was saying. It's not just about earth, fire on earth. There's heat and then light and so forth. These things come into play. And that's where we then get into the physics of heat, the physics of light. But then in Suddha Sanmargam, the College of Suddha Sanmargam, a University of Suddha Sanmargam, we're going to be seeing, we're not going to just simply study these things in the abstract, but we're going to see how they support the Jivan. Okay? And then whatever technology we can develop that will help to protect the Jivan from the harmful factors, that will protect the Jivan or the living being from harmful factors, help the Jivan or the living being to flourish. That's what we're talking. And I think this is, some may think that I'm getting carried away here, but I have my bearings. I know what I'm talking about. This is a complete new revolution. Okay? A science and technology of Vir Nalam, or life-oriented, life-preserving, life-protecting science and technology. That's the next revolution. And the choices are pretty stark. Either we develop this Vir Nalam technology and science, or we will perish. Vir Nasam will come. Maybe not all life forms will be extinguished. It's all in the hands of Arutha and Jyoti. But there is karma. You cannot escape from karma, which means actions have consequences. If I'm storing dynamite in my garage and then I'm playing with fire, what's going to happen? Okay? You can't blame Arutha and Jyoti for that. It happens in terms of niyati. Okay? If I am stupid enough not to know what the effect of fire is going to be on all those cases of dynamite, I have only my stupidity to blame. So if I choose to remain ignorant of all these developments in climate change and global warming, the pollution, the environmental pollution, I really don't have much of a basis to complain when I come down with cancer or some other serious health issue. Okay? Or God forbid, my wife and or children, loved ones. So these things have pretty serious consequences, Karma Bedam is a very important notion in Vallalar. Karma Bedam means the different actions you perform and the different consequences they have. You perform intelligent actions, the good actions, the consequences will be beneficial. You perform stupid actions, malicious actions, and so forth, the consequences will be harmful. So that has to be kept in mind in this context. So Jeevanai Valakkansaivikkum Budagni Totram, Jeevanai Adhigaripikkum Buddha Vayu Totram. He's talking about the wind principle and how that helps in the propagation of living beings. You can see that happening with, for example, plants. Seeds have to be scattered. Pollination occurs and you have plant life and so forth. Wind also carries germs and so forth, so wind plays a very important role, and there are other properties of wind that Vallalar mentions in his verses that have great importance for life. So when we understand the importance of Buddha Vayu Totram, then we're going to develop a science and technology, and we're going to develop a science, and that's going to give us a technology that's not going to pollute the wind, but that's going to harness and use the positive forces of the wind. Then we have Jeevanai Vyabhagam Saivikum Buddha Veli Totram, space. And on Earth it's the sky and the atmosphere. And Vallalar has pointed out again with this deep insight and revolutionary insight how the sky and the atmosphere also play a role in sustaining life. Okay? So that means, again, pollution and so forth can stay in the atmosphere, and we know that the carbon emissions, carbon dioxide is getting trapped and is trapping heat in the atmosphere and so forth. These all have very adverse effects on life. So what we do to the Buddha Valley has a serious impact on life, on the Jivan. Okay? So hopefully I'm giving you some indications. Then he speaks of Uba Prithvi, Uba Nir, Uba Agni, Uba Vayu. These are very interesting references. He's speaking of auxiliary earth, auxiliary water, auxiliary fire or heat, auxiliary wind, and so forth. What are these auxiliary elements? Okay, that's something to study in the university or college of Suddha Sanmargam or any kind of education program. I mean, you can develop one for yourself, customized to your situation and your needs to start pursuing these things. So the science in Suddha Sanmargam is going to examine all of this. And remember again how it's all oriented towards Vir Nalam, or the well-being of life, the flourishing of life, the preservation of the conditions of existence, and expansion of life. There are other things, and let me just wrap up here. I've mentioned Anda Vicharam and Pinda Vicharam. Pinda Vicharam has to do with biology. That means also human anatomy and physiology. And that's why Vallalar says part of that we ask, why don't we grow hair on our forehead? Why do we grow nails? Ultimately, we come to genetics. This is a study of human physiology. He's only giving us a couple of examples of questions to pursue. But he is talking about anatomy, physiology, human anatomy, physiology, and of course anatomy, physiology of other living beings, and genetics, so that we can understand the structure of the degam, or the body. And what would be the point of that? Well, then we can understand what is helpful to it and what is harmful to it. And it's also essential, of course, for the science of health in Suddha Sanmargam. I mean, what is this health? It's the health of the body. So to develop the science of health, you have to then have correct knowledge of the body to which it's all applied. Okay, so there's all science of health that also involves Pinda Vicharam, biology, genetics, and so forth, forming part of the curriculum in the university or college of Suddha Sanmargam. There is Anda Vicharam, which is cosmology, which I've already talked about, and which also involves exactly what I was talking about in terms of the 5 elements, the Budagni, Buddha Prithvi, and so on and so forth. How do they support life? That's part of Anda Vicharam. And Anda Vicharam also includes carbon in our bodies. Carbon essential for life. Where does it come from? Oh, it came from the stars. Okay, how did that happen? That's all part of Anda Vicharam, part of the science program in the university or college of Suddha Sanmargam. Now, it's not just science, it is also art. That's why, this verse, which is there in the Katharul, very interestingly enough, Vallalar says, Kalai arivalit kalipinil uiralam alivara Katharul arupparanjodi. Can't go into a commentary and explanation here, but just take note of Kalai Arivu. Kalai Arivu. Kalai Arivu is the aesthetic Arivu, artistic Arivu, or the Arivu that helps us to appreciate beauty and art, okay, paintings, music, and so forth. And one of the implications here is that, well, of course, we have that Kalai Arivu. And the Kalai Arivu, Alparanjodi has designed, organized it, which means we have to develop that, not neglect that. So that means artistic education, education in the arts becomes central. But then again, as in everything else in Suddha Sanmargam, we're not pursuing beauty merely for some sensory stimulation or excitement, but we are pursuing beauty as an indicator of the presence of Arutparanjodi. All this Erul is the Tamil word for beauty. The Erul has come about from, ultimately it has its origins in Arutparanjodi. So when we study beauty, Erul, and its different manifestations, using our Kalai Arivu, or artistic intellect or intelligence, we are trying to follow the road back to Arutparanjodi. So that's the other fundamental principle. Remember, Arul, the workings of Arut Shakti. We keep that in mind, and that's what distinguishes these things in Suddha Sanmargam from the other things that are now being done, usually for commercial purposes, vulgarizing everything for commercial purposes. We don't take that kind of, our approach in Suddha Sanmargam is completely different. So there is the arts, and it's also indicated in all the verses in the Agaval where he praises Arupparanjodi as Yar Isaye, Yar. And I was mentioning this to Gopi, I believe. Yar, what happened to Yar? It's a fundamental instrument in ancient Tamil culture, stringed instrument, a zither, like a harp. So, Suddha Sanmargam music education, Yar will take a very prominent place. And the music for Yar, there was a Swami called Vipulananda. He's written a very good book in Tamil, very scholarly work on Yar, and the music of the Yar. That will be part of the curriculum in the program of higher education in Suddha Sanmargam, and we can also consider related instruments, veena, and other things, the Japanese koto, the Chinese guzheng, and so forth. They're all stringed instruments. That will be part of the arts program. But the verse praises Arupparanjodi as the music of the Yar. In Isaye, Yerurum Isaye, the Isaye of the seven sounds of the Swaranga. Okay? So, that points to the importance. Again, as I said, the Agaval is a treasure chest of teachings. Very revolutionary teachings, teachings of extraordinarily high order, and all absolutely relevant to our present, problems and challenges. So in any case, the music is already celebrated. The sound Isai is celebrated as a manifestation of Arupparanjodi. And so the arts education in Suddha Sanmargam will include music and also Geetham. Geetham, he also invokes Geetham, Part, song. All of that is going to be part of Suddha Sanmargam, but it will all be oriented towards Arupparanjodi, an expression of devotion and our attempts to understand the presence of Arupparanjodi in various manifestations of beauty, including beauty of sound in Isai and so forth. And then finally, I know I've been saying finally, thank you for your patience, language. Language studies, Vallala himself wrote some works on grammar and so forth. And Tamil, of course, being a classical living language. Sanskrit is a classical language, but it's not a living language, nor is Latin. Latin is not a living language, but Tamil is a living language, classical language. It's a pretty old language, and Vallala makes a few statements that open up actually, research program. He says in the second Vinnapam, I believe, that's why the second Vinnapam is very important. He says that, speaking of Tamil, he says, Idambattayum, Aravaratayum, Prayasattayum, Perumaraipayum, Poduvokkayum undu pannuginra Arya mudaliya bhashaigalil எனக்கு ஆசை சொல்ல விட்டாது. Aryam here would be Sanskrit and things that are derived from Sanskrit, I suppose Hindi. ஆசை சொல்ல விட்டாது. He's not saying that, we should condemn it doesn't make any sense to condemn any language, but he's not saying we should, he's just talking about his own interest. He's saying, he developed an interest not in Sanskrit, and he has, of course, some comments on Sanskrit. He's referring to he's saying that it's kind of there's more effort involved in learning and it's more difficult to learn and so forth. And then these statements can, of course, form part of the research studies. Instead of that, பயிலுதற்கும் அறிதற்கும் மிகவும் லேசுடையதாய், பாடுதற்கும் துதித்தற்கும் மிகவும் இனிமையுடையதாய், சாகா கல்வியை லேசில் அறிவிப்பதாய், திருவருள் வளத்தார் கிடைத்த தென்மொழி ஒன்றினிடத்தே மனம் பெற்ற செய்து, அத்தென்மொழிகளார் பல்வகை தோத்திர பாட்டுகளை பாடுவித்தருளினீர். He is saying actually Arupparanjodi actually gave him this interest in Tamil and enabled him to compose all these songs and writings in Tamil. But he's also saying, again, he's making some observations about Tamil. He's saying it's easy to learn. It's very musical and so forth. And these are things that can be pursued as part of the research. You can't just simply assert these things. You have to do some comparison and find the evidence for these things. And one of these claims here that need to be pursued as part of any kind of research into Tamil is Tamil Tamil grammar comparatively easier to learn? Okay, that's a research question to pursue. I'm not aware of any research that is focused on this question. There have been comparative studies of Tamil grammar and other grammars and studies on the origin of Tamil and its relationship with other languages. But the point that Vallalar makes is a legitimate question for research. Is it really easier to learn Tamil? Is there something about the structure of Tamil grammar, that makes it easier to learn? And is there some intrinsic or inherent musical quality in Tamil? Such that the songs and other things composed in Tamil have this melodiousness. பாடுதற்கும் துதித்தற்கும் மிகவும் இனிமையுடையதாய். And then, of course, he makes this extraordinary statement. Saga kalviye lesil arivuppadaai. He is saying Tamil has the capacity to communicate truths about Saga Kalvi, the science and art of deathlessness, in a very clear way. He's saying Tamil somehow has the power to express with clarity and ease the truths about Saga Kalvi. Again, that's a very arresting claim that needs to be investigated, pursued. But we can start with the fundamental question of whether Tamil grammar has a simpler structure and whether that is playing a role in making Tamil a very effective medium for clear communication, expression, and so forth. Well, I mean, he's not saying Tamil is the only thing that does it, but he does attribute it to Tamil. Therefore, and of course he does make that contrast with Sanskrit, which is also another question of research. Are there differences between Tamil grammar and Sanskrit grammar such that the Tamil grammar comes out to be simpler and easier to learn and so forth? This is another research project. Okay. So there are a lot of things here, to pursue. If we take our great teachers' teaching seriously, again, I have to put it this way. I don't mean to offend anybody or criticize anybody, but it's not just about simply praying to Vallalar and all that. It's about sitting down and doing the work of examining the teachings and continuing with the vicharam, and then engaging in kalvi, teaching and teaching those teachings and so forth, based on vicharam, araichi, and all that. So that's the part about language. And then also, there are many verses in the Agaval that deal with the number, Patinil and so forth. Where are those verses? I have the whole volume. Unfortunately, I didn't put the stickers on it, but Well, there are many verses. There are a set of verses in the Agavo that deal with the number. Okay, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, and so forth. Yes, I found this. ஒன்றினில் ஒன்றே ஒன்றிடை ஆயிரம் அன்றர வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி பத்திடை ஆயிரம் பகரதிற் கோடி அத்துர வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி நூற்றிடை இலக்கம் நுவலதில் அனந்தம் ஆற்றிடை வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி கோடியில் அனந்த கோடி பல் கோடி ஆடுர வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, 4 verses, starting at 621. Okay? Well, let me repeat them. ஒன்றினில் ஒன்றே ஒன்றிடை ஆயிரம் அன்றர வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி பத்திடை ஆயிரம் பகரதிற் கோடி அத்துர வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி நூற்றிடை இலக்கம் நுவலதில் அனந்தம் ஆற்றிடை வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி கோடியில் அனந்த கோடி பல் கோடி ஆடுர வகுத்த அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி. These are dealing with numbers, properties of numbers, starting with small and large and talking about their relations. Okay? Tell us again about the depth and breadth of Vallalar's understanding. How did this is all his work, and of course he would say it is the grace of Arupparanjodi, but then he did something to deserve that grace. Okay? It's not like Sai Baba pulling something out of the sleeve and you just take it without doing any work. These verses deal with the properties of numbers, small and large numbers, and their relations. So that is mathematics in the Agavo. And so Suddha Sanmargam, the higher education program, will focus on the theory of numbers, as it's called, numbers and their properties, and take these verses that I read as the basis. And this can be pursued in a later talk. We can look at some specifics, and I have to do my homework on the theory of numbers. But it's very clear he's addressing things that pertain to the theory of numbers in mathematics, which is a very fundamental branch of mathematics. Okay? So these are all the things that can be developed, but we have to sit down, examine carefully, and formulate lines of inquiry, lines of research, and content that is going to be important for these forms of inquiry and research, and that would form part of the whole structure of courses in the system of higher education based on Suddha Sanmargam. So again, I've only sketched certain things, and I've pointed out, statements in Vallalar's works, primarily the Agavo, which you can spend an entire lifetime and several lifetimes immersing oneself in. That should be a main focus that I've been repeating in several of these talks. Focus on the Agavo. That is almost an inexhaustible treasure chest. So I hope I've made the connections, and I have pointed out certain lines that you can pursue, and also topics that we can work on, and I can address more specifics in more detail in other talks. So Arupparanjodi, 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 Thaniparangarni. Thank you for your patience. I think I've exceeded my time, the usual time, but then given the topic of a whole program of higher education, a revolutionary system of higher education, that is the need of the day based on Suddha Sanmargam and its revolutionary system of ethics and values, it did require, I think, even for this introduction, I think it did require this much time. So I thank you for your patience, and if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, welcome to hear them.